Welcome to the De-Stress Your Business podcast, where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at Air Manual, and I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host, Paddy Mann. Good morning.
Good morning.
Today we're going to be talking about onboarding of new team members and specifically why it's often done so badly. We'll cover the impact that this has, what it costs the business, and what causes the key issues. So Paddy, let's start off with, how does bad onboarding feel and what stress does that cause? We'll cover both for the employee and for the wider team.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll start with the employee. And I think when we're thinking about the stress, the first thing to remember is that every time when you start a new role, it is a moment of excitement, and you express that excitement to your friends and family, you tell them about it. But for pretty much everyone that I've seen start a new role, everyone that I've had start a new role below me, and in my own experience, is also a time of anxiety. You are anxious about the change. It's a huge change in your life. It's a moment of instability. You are anxious about whether you are going to be able to deliver on the performance that your company is now going to expect and the new team members will expect. Will you meet the expectations that you set in your interview process and so on? You will be also anxious about whether the company and the new team is going to meet your expectations. Are they going to support you in a new way? Are they going to correct some of the mistakes or issues that you may have had in previous roles? So it's definitely a period of excitement, but it's also this kind of anxiety. So there's kind of this ground level of stress going in, which, when done well, you've got companies that can solve that can help the new employee to feel reassured and get confident quickly and be well supported throughout it. Whereas when it's not done so well, and I hate to say it, but I think not being done so well is the norm rather than the few bad cases.
Agreed.
Then obviously that anxiety grows and often stays around for a much longer period than it should, because it takes much longer to feel comfortable in the new role and to really understand where you sit. There can be a sense of kind of frustration because things often move a lot slower than the employee had hoped. They got excited about all the things they're going to be doing in their new role and all the great things they're going to achieve. And the reality hits home that getting up to speed requires a lot of meetings, and actually they don't get the time with the right people they need, and all the knowledge that they need to get running isn't there. And then in the worst case, they're waiting for an actual laptop, but it's often waiting for login details or waiting to get access to a manager or whatever. And it's just this kind of knocking into their excitement and turning it into kind of a sense of, okay, maybe this not going to be so great, but you hopefully you've still got hope at that point. But if it continues, if you're kind of getting weeks and months in and there are some kind of persistent issues, you're not getting the guidance that you need to do your job well. As a result, you're making mistakes. As a result, the managers and other people around you are noticing it, and you can see that it's hurting them, providing a huge amount of time and support for you. Then obviously that then leads to bigger stresses. You get insecure in your role. That excitement at joining the new company, it diminishes into disillusionment, and obviously at that point, it's not just that you're unhappy potentially in the role, but you may well be starting to look for a new one. And it's a huge percentage. I think sometimes it's like 30% of new employees will leave their company within the space of months. And you sometimes talk about it being a bad hire, but I always think that's not quite right. I think often it is a good hire that hasn't been supported, and I think it's actually, I would argue, more common that you've hired someone who's capable, but they haven't been given the kind of the support, the frameworks that they needed to have a chance to make it work. So yeah, that's the employee. So quite a lot of stress wrapped up in there. I'll give you a chance to speak before I look at the other side on the manager and the team.
Yeah, I think you summarised it really well. I think I really like the fact that we start here by acknowledging that this is a very human experience. You know,
Yeah.
it's, I think the temptation is when you're looking at company onboarding and getting someone set up in a role and sorting out people's contracts and all these sorts of things, like it can feel very businessy. It can feel very, oh yes, and typically because for a business owner, a business leader, like they've poured so much time and effort into the recruitment process that sometimes I think the employee onboarding part feels almost like, oh, do I have to? Like I've put 3 to 6 months into recruiting this person, and it's almost like I think often the finish line feels like the agreeing the start date, whereas in reality it's that was the short easy bit. The real value and the important bit comes into how you onboard that employee and how you get them set up and all these things for the very reasons that you've described, because of the anxiety of going in and because of this is where the rubber meets the road. It's where that employee is basically judging, did they make a good decision? And otherwise they're going to go through essentially sort of buyer's remorse of saying, actually I'm not sure I did. And I've seen for when talking to other business owners, I remember talking to one who said that they had a hire that they made who left after 7 weeks, and it was really frustrating because they'd spent ages doing the recruitment, limiting them down, identifying exactly who the right person was, and bringing them in, and then that person leaves after 7 weeks, and it's all for nothing. And I was discussing it with this business owner and talking about some of the challenges, and there was another business owner who owned an accounting firm who sat sat near us, and he went, I had that after 2 days. And like, imagine in fact I was going to say, imagine what experience it must take that someone leaves after 2 days of joining their company. But actually I think, as you said at the beginning, that's not far off the norm. Unfortunately, for many people, for many employees, their experience of joining a new business is that they turn up and it might even be that the manager goes, oh, is that today? Oh, you're coming today? Oh, well, great, welcome. Let's see if we can find you a desk. Tina, I think she's out today, so you can use her chair and her desk, and we'll sort you out with a computer. It's like, that doesn't create a great experience and adds to all the anxiety and the lack of feeling belonging and so on. It reminds me of a Dilbert cartoon where the first frame is that the employee is meeting their manager for the first day, and the manager's saying, we don't really have formal onboarding here. We like to let our employees learn by osmosis. And the second frame is the employee going, I was an idiot to choose to work here. And the third frame is the manager saying, see, you're starting to think like the rest of the staff already. And I think that's, unfortunately, when the default is we learn by osmosis, and that we like to just put you around the other members of the team and hope that that's how you're going to learn how to do the job. I think that it creates so much additional anxiety for the employee, because it basically says to the employee, right, responsibility is on you, that you have to work out what matters and what doesn't. You have to keep your eyes peeled and observe and ask the right questions to understand how this business works. What are the most important things to get right? How do we create success here and impact and so on? And you put all of that on them when it doesn't need to be that way. And I think often the best employees that we've ever hired are, perhaps ironically, the ones that are least sure of their ability to add value, and that they're the most nervous, the most anxious about how quickly that they're going to be able to do that. And of course, those are the ones you want to keep the most. So I think it's a very human experience, and one that most of us have had once or more than once, and also know other people that have had some really bad experiences. So it's really painful for the employee. What about for the rest of the team then? What's the stress that it causes them?
Well, I'll start with the manager, because this is, you say it's a human experience for the employees. Certainly, as a manager and as a business owner, bringing in initial employees, I found it to be a very human experience there as well. You're building a new relationship with someone. You're taking a risk on your company, on the whole team, by bringing in a new component, and you don't know how well it's going to fit. You don't know how it's going to work with the other people, the other parts. And if you're in a small business, then it's a very expensive component. It's a very expensive new toy, and it costs you a significant amount every week, every month. And it's like, if it doesn't work out, then there's this huge stress on what that means for your ability to hit your goals, to grow your company, or even to survive. And you've hired because perhaps you've identified opportunities to grow, but more likely you are stretched thin. You do not have time at this moment. You have got to the point where you realize you're about to burst, so you're bringing someone else in new. You've gone through recruitment, which has knocked you sideways, and you're going, we desperately just need more hands on deck to get going. And then the new person comes in and you're like, brilliant, when are we going to start seeing the impact? And there's this kind of hope that with very little effort from above, we're going to start seeing this big positive change. But it's not going to be like that, and particularly if you're relying on hope rather than systems to see you through. And as a manager, that the types of stress you're going to see if you haven't got kind of a systemized onboarding process, it's going to take a huge amount of time. You're going to discover that there is a huge amount of knowledge that they need to hand over, that they're, even with the best of intent, even the cleverest people, they have no way of understanding the values and vision and goals and best practices of how each task is done in the eyes of your company and of you as a manager. They have no way to get that other than by using whatever systems and guidance you give them, by talking to people, or osmosis, which means talking to people, making mistakes, hopefully having mistakes corrected over some period of time, and that normally taking months and years to get anywhere. So it's really stressful because your time is being taken up. You're being derailed from your other priorities. But then there's the stress of doubt that you will start to form about the new employee, because they will be underperforming. They will be making mistakes again and again. We sometimes describe like when you teach people, if you remember, if you've been to university and you've been in lectures and you kind of imagine that you're being lectured to, and you come out of that lecture and you go, okay, what do I remember? And it's like, there's no way that you remember all the details. You remember the kind of the high level points, the general direction of there being something important to know about. But then you've got Google to go back to, you've got your textbooks to go back to. And yet in so many companies, the onboarding, they give them the lecture, but there's nothing else there. And then they're surprised when they make mistakes because they don't forget every little detail, or as is quite often the case, there are details which the manager forgets to pass across in that lecture. And so they're making mistakes, and you solve it by lecturing them again, and you don't feel like it's a lecture. You feel like it's a good quality coaching conversation, and the employee kind of goes, yes, I understand, and so on. But that's what it is. They are not having other resources that they can use proactively to solve their problem. So they do forget again. They do make the same mistakes, and you get this doubt. And I've been there. I've been the cold sweats, the wake late at night, because I'm wondering if I've made a terrible decision. And I was wondering about a developer we'd hired, who, when we went through that recruitment process, I think we had 1,600 applicants, and we whittled it down. And I can assure anyone listening that this guy was shining above everyone else, even in the last 10 that we'd narrowed down. And we did many projects, we did all sorts of things to test, and I could see that he is way better than the average. And I know for sure that this guy is exceptional at what he does. But he was making the same mistakes again and again, and I was doubting it. I was wondering whether we need to try again, whether I need to go back to doing it myself. And of course, we're holding back the business, we're holding back growth. There's this big unspoken conflict between me and the new joiner, and that's me as a manager. And of course, the rest of the team feel the same kind of pains as a manager, because they're also investing a large amount of time. They're also being derailed from their priorities, and they're also second guessing whether it was a good decision to bring this person in. And say normally, that's completely unfair on the new person coming in, because they just haven't got the chance. They haven't got the systems, the ground systems in place on which they can have a good swing of the bat have a good chance at doing well in their job.
Yeah, completely agree. I think there's a few different causes of stress, and you've, I think, done a good job there of going around a variety of them. The one that I probably see most commonly is, or at least, and particularly up front, is the time stress. It's the fact that often people are hiring because they're stretched, exactly as you say. And if you take an example of when I've hired into sales, often you're hiring in sales because you've managed to crack, okay, this is how we've got some leads, coming in the top of the funnel. And on the one hand, you know that you're, as the leader, you know that one of your top priorities is get these new employees in, trained up, so that they can now take the strain, that they can start delivering value, and that they can be converting and having those sales conversations and doing the follow up and all those sorts of things that allow you to grow the business and go back to lead generation and so on. But of course, the stress is, that they won't be ready in hour one of joining, definitely not, and you don't know for sure when they will be ready, and so you end up having to do both. You end up having to do both the onboarding and the job, and so that feels very stressful because you're trying to fit it in and fit it all in. And I think for a lot of managers, they end up doing the prep for the onboarding outside working hours. They're doing it, late at night, the morning before, all these sorts of things for that new employee to join, so that they can still be doing some of that day to day. But then, of course, they also find that the employee, particularly as you say, if the structure's not there, then that new employee needs quite a bit of attention. They're high maintenance, which leads the manager to find themselves pulled between pillar and post, and straight out of a sales meeting, straight into the meeting with the team member, and then out of the team member to back in with another sales call or whatever. And of course, that's not a great look for the employee, because it looks sort of overwhelmed and frenetic and stressed and so on. And for the manager, it just, it feels horrid, and there's quite a bit of risk there in terms of what it means for your sales and so on. So I think in terms of that stress, and of course we've talked quite a bit about the manager there, but for all the other team members, like the other team members that are either taking up the slack or having to answer the questions, getting the derails, and wondering, exactly as you say, wondering, is this person a good hire? And often the answer is they should be. You've done enough on your recruitment process, but it's just that you need to set them up to succeed. So I really like that. I mean, we're talking a lot about the emotional cost, I suppose, and the risk there. What about the financial? Because we know that this can easily cost tens or even hundreds of thousands of pounds per hire. So why is, when we break that down, why is that, and where are the costs coming from, and how does that add up?
Yeah, good question, and it's something that we. I think, certainly as business owners, but as most people bringing in new people, we choose not to think about. We like to be optimists and look at the fact that we've got a solution, and we don't look at the risk that we're taking on at the same time and how to avoid that risk materializing. And when you put numbers on it, if you are open and honest about it, if you reflect on your own experiences in the past, or any other business leader, owner, manager, about the reality, then these are big, hairy numbers that deserve a lot more investment and time than you're trying to solve with sorting out their onboarding a few days before they start in the after hours. It's a significant pain point which is going to hold you back, hold your team back, and will often knock a team or business back for 6 months or a year or more. So, what are some of the specifics? Well, first, you've got the new employee. They've come in, they are not getting up to the speed, and they are not delivering on their promise of providing value for your team. And that means, of course, any value that they could be delivering, and if done well, we like to get our, for example, developers. It's a highly skilled area of the business, lots of best practice, but we get them adding value by the end of week one. For many, many companies, we're talking weeks, months, or even longer until they're consistently adding more value to the team than they are taking away from the business through the additional support and needs they want. So First, there's the cost of not having an extra hand actually solving your problems. Then there's a cost of the derail for you and your team. First, with the coaching and the lectures, the training that you're trying to give them, but essentially, the one-to-one calls that you give up front. And often, he'll go around different team members to get different bits of expertise, all of these sessions. But then it's the ongoing support because they don't get remembered. These lectures, they most of the details get forgotten, which leads to mistakes happening, the mistakes need managing, and then additional coaching and one-to-one calls are needed to correct them. And then similar mistakes happen again and again and again. And you're now losing a significant chunk of your week every week to supporting the challenges that are coming up. And this is costing you in terms of your time, but it's costing the opportunity. That is time that we want managers to spend on strategy, on making product improvements, on improving processes. So there's a huge opportunity cost for what your team could be doing if they are not supporting the employee. Then there's the cost of when it often goes down the pan and the employee goes, then at that point you've got the cost of the massive derail investment you've made on recruitment, plus all the time that you've invested up to this point. It's likely that the employees added net barely anything benefit to your company, and they've lost. So there's a huge cost at this point. And in many companies, it's like we're talking 30% of employees go this way in the first year. And it may be that they leave within the first couple of days, which is crap and painful. But in some ways, it's better than if they leave after 2 weeks, when you've been derailed for 2 weeks and they've not delivered any benefit. And we've had it where they've left after a year because it wasn't just that initial first few weeks, but it was the ongoing support that we got them. They never got up to full speed. And this is really, really common that you've got people in your company that have been there for years and still, they're not up to full speed. They don't have some of the key knowledge or understanding how to do tasks which you want them to. And so we've, at that point, spent a whole year investing a lot of time, solving a lot of mistakes. And again, we've lost them. That entire investment in something that could be helping our team and unblocking us from growth goes. And yeah, we go back to square one. We suddenly have to stop what we're doing, take on the tasks that we had managed to hand over, and go back around the loop. So, tens of thousands of pounds is if you're lucky, kind of number. Hundreds of thousands of pounds, yes, yeah. That's the norm. And for certain hires, with the impact that the mistakes that they make can have on your sales, on your product, on anything else, it can go seven figures and beyond.
Yeah, agreed. No, I really like that. I think there's some obvious costs and then there's a lot of hidden costs. And I think you've covered a lot of the hidden costs. I remember seeing a statistic which said that when you have a failed hire, so like someone who leaves early in that journey, typically because of poor onboarding process and so on, that it costs you 3 times their salary in terms of opportunity costs, in terms of training costs, and all these sorts of things. And so that means for someone who's on just above 33,000 a year, sort of not a crazy salary, but average, like that cost the business £100,000 for that one failed hire. And so if for every 2 or 3 people that you're hiring, you've got that kind of situation, that's a significant amount of money that could be being used to further grow the business more effectively, which makes me think of the other challenge, which again is one of those hidden costs, is the cost of slowing down growth. Because often when we're talking about onboarding, we're really thinking about like individual hires, like, okay, I've hired a developer or hired a salesperson or whatever. But of course, for some really fast growth businesses, but actually for any business over a period of time, we're not just hiring about 1 or 2 people. We're talking about hiring large quantities of people over an extended period. And the speed with which you can do that, and that you feel confident doing that, and that you feel able to bring in 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 people at the same time, is largely going to help determine your ability to scale and grow when things are going well. And when you're not able to do that, when it kind of feels like, oh well, I'd like to bring in 2, 3, 5 people, but we haven't got time to train all of that and get them all up to speed. Therefore, we'll just do 1 or 2 now and then stagger them and so on. The impact of that, the slowing down of your growth and ability to scale for those fast growth businesses, is easily worth 7 figures, and particularly when you roll it forward over the years. So it's it's an extremely expensive thing to both be losing employees, losing the time, losing the opportunity, that opportunity cost of what they could be doing, and also slowing down growth. So we've talked about a few reasons, but why do you think it is that most onboarding sucks? Like, why is it that most businesses are treating this as the norm and that they're kind of stuck with how it currently works?
Good question. And this is an area where we, of course, have put a lot of thought in, both in our own experiences and sort of in our own onboarding. And because when we're talking to businesses around the challenges they have with their business processes and the things that are holding them back in their business, then about 50% of the businesses that we're talking to will highlight that their urgent challenge that they've got is that they're trying to scale the team, and they've got a new employee either who's just started or they're about to hire, or they want to hire and feel blocked from doing so. And so it's something that we've now had to work with. Must be hundreds of business leaders in solving this specific problem, and we see 5 big points which are holding the companies back that are doing badly, that we are looking to then try and solve. So these 5 points why we see onboarding sucking in so many organizations. First one is there's just this ambiguity around where onboarding really sits. Literally talking yesterday to someone, and they're seeing we're doing some of our policies are set up in HR, and I've got the team creating some in their own systems, and what's going on here. And people don't realize it. They think that employee onboarding is a single process that should be led by a single person, but that's not actually how it can or should happen. Really, you've got your company onboarding, where you are looking to bring someone up to speed with your company values, your goals, all the context they need about how you as a broad team in your company work together. And that would typically belong to HR as a central function who can take responsibility for this. And then you've got role onboarding. And this is where you're trying to get someone up to speed in everything that they need to be doing to be confident in their role. And so often people believe that all the onboarding, well, it sounds like an HR term, therefore it lives in HR, and HR is responsible for doing it. There's no way that HR can bring your team up to speed in what they need to be able to do to excel in their role. They don't have the ability to understand that role. They don't have the ability to define the tasks. They don't have that. And so you have to split it. It just cannot work when you try and put it all in HR. Not only is there a problem with it trying to put it all in HR, but it's associated with that. It's not even a 50-50 split. The company onboarding, though it's this big thing that's important for everyone coming in, is something that will typically take a few days max, and often quicker than that. The role onboarding is something that's going to last for weeks, months, maybe even years, depending on the role. So actually, that's where the biggest focus of time needs to go in for your new joiners. So that's the first mistake: believing onboarding lives in HR when it needs to be split. Second one is not setting clear goals for what the onboarding needs to do. And so assuming that it's just about getting people ready over the first few days, it's more of an induction about, welcome to the team, and here's your computer, and here's how we work, and you'll work it out over the next 2 years. If you set the goal for your role onboarding as something more like, we want employees to be happy and confident so they can excel in all areas of their role, then just having that clarity of the goal, suddenly you realize, well, that's not going to happen within a week. and it changes the scope of what you're going to try and achieve, and it greatly changes your chances of actually succeeding with the onboarding that you provide. The third one is a lack of foundations, and we often talk about the pyramid of guidance. On the foundational level, you want to have SOPs that describe how to do tasks. They can be simple checklists and policies. Your training needs to be a layer above. You cannot have training as the foundation for how you provide guidance, because people forget. Instead, you need to have things documented in some form. It could be a video or written down checklist, but it needs to be available so people can proactively solve their challenges. And if you don't have that foundational layer, then you're going to see the mistakes. You're going to see the osmosis. Fourth one is expecting everyone to move at the same pace. That simply isn't the case for any two joiners that we come in, and we often bring in two or more people into the same role at the same time. We will see that they go at a different pace, and they have different learning styles. They have different levels of experience coming into the role. There are some areas. It's often you see them almost like a race car going against each other. There'll be one area where one will fly through it because they've used the tool before, because they understand that concept. And then you'll see another area where someone else will go faster. Sometimes you'll have new joiners who are going to take a lot longer for everything that they're learning, just because of the way that they learn. And it has little or no reflection on how they then deliver or their impact or speed later on. And you have to remember this as a manager, because it can be a stress point going, oh man, it feels like this person's going slow. We've now seen it enough to know that you cannot read from the speed. It is just that some people need to read and make their notes and challenge and so on, while others are just happy to scan, knowing that they can come back to it later. And it makes a big difference. But people don't move at the same speed, so you have to accommodate that. And then the final one, the fifth one that I'll put in there, is that if you Google for how to do great onboarding, if you go looking online, then you're going to find a lot of articles and blogs which I would say are a bit fluffy, and they focus on the really shiny bells and whistles that you can do on top of solid onboarding. So the amazing laminated pack with everything branded and 20 different items that are all branded, and the poster and all the little things that are being sent out to make someone feel great. And this is not that it's bad to do it. Obviously, if you're able to throw in stuff on top and make people feel great, then that's amazing. But that is not how you get to great onboarding. You can have little or none of that if you've got the foundations. If someone is able to come into the role and work out what they need to do, that's 100 times more important. And in terms of that wow factor, it's actually just little things to make sure that the new employee feels welcome and supported when they come in will make all the difference. You don't need the shiny things, but it's the shiny things which so often get the attention on blogs, on social media. And that can be confusing to you as someone who's trying to solve onboarding in your company.
Love that. Love those reasons, and completely agree with that. And I think that last one particularly resonates for me of when I see posts about onboarding and when people talk about it, at events and people are on the stage, and so often the things that they're referring to are, send them a gift, or do this with this experience, or, invite them to this particular location to give them an experience of that. And it's like, those things are great, and they can create some of the connection, they can create some memorable experiences and so on. But as you say, you don't it's not that you don't need those things, but they're a relatively small part of the impact, and so I absolutely love that. I'm conscious that we're short on time. Our intention this session is to just cover why onboarding often sucks. And so in a subsequent episode, we're going to cover how to actually fix these issues. What is the process to do that? What are the things that you actually need in place if it's not some of the things that we've described? So we're going to cover that on a subsequent episode. But so far in today's episode, we covered how does bad onboarding feel, what stress it causes, the cost that there's been for the business, and that we've seen the financial cost easily goes into six figures per hire. And as Paddy's just taken us through, why onboarding typically sucks, and what are the kind of root causes for why business leaders let it be treated so poorly and managed by it so badly. But in our next episode, we will go deep into how do you fix these issues, how do you create onboarding that doesn't suck and creates a great outcome. Anything else to cover, Paddy, before we wrap up?
Nope. Looking forward to tomorrow's episode.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, now, as a regular listeners will know, we run a weekly webinar on how to free up 15 hours per week and remove the constant stress of running a business without slowing down growth. It's every Wednesday at 1 p.m. UK time, and you can find out more and register at www.airmanual.co/webinar. And a final note for our podcast listeners, as a new podcast, we need your help. If you found the content today interesting and valuable, please can you just take 1 minute to leave an honest review. This will help the podcast get more visibility and, as a result, allow us to help more people. Until next time, have fun.